Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, and I am presiding within the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today's date is Thursday, March 20th, 2014. And all I have to say is, man, time is flying by rapidly. And so I'm going to be doing a few topics. And it's going to be pretty cool stuff, like as usual. First thing I'm going to be narrating is written by Dave Landorf, and it's from a site called Who, What, Why, which you can go to whowhatwhy.com to check it out. And I like their little slogan: we don't cover the news, we cover the truth. So the first thing would be called Crimes Down, so why is police aggression increasing? So let's begin. You might know it from watching TV news, but FBI statistics show that crime in the U.S., including violent crime, has been trending steadily downward for years, falling 19% between 1987 and 2011. The job of being a police officer has become safer too, as the number of police killed by gunfire plunged to 33 last year, down to 50% from 2012, to its lowest level since. Wait for it. 1887, a time when the population was 75% than it is today. So why we are seeing an increasing militarization of policing across the country. Given the good news on crime, what we are to make of a report by the Justice Privacy Institute, a not-for-profit justice reform group, showing that state and local spending on police has soared from $40 billion in 1982 to more than $100 billion in 2012. Adding in federal spending on law enforcement, including the FBI, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, the Drug Enforcement Agency, and much of Homeland Security Department budget, as well as federal grants to state and local law enforcement, more than doubles that total. A lot of that money is simply pay and benefits. The Federal Bureau of Justice Statistics report that the rank of states and local law enforcement personnel alone swelled from 603,000 to 794,000 between 1992 and 2010. That's about 2/3 as many men and women as the entire active duty U.S. military. What these statistics make clear that the policing in America is ramping up even as the crime rate is falling. To advocates of militarized policing, that just proves that more and better armed cops are the answer to keeping the peace. But former corrections officer Ted Kirkpatrick, like many experts in the field, warns against jumping to this conclusion. Police will, of course, says crime is down because of them. He tells who, what, why, but they have a vested interest in saying that. Kirkpatrick has the credentials and training to look beyond statistics and simplistic answers to the underlying social forces at work here. In addition to his years of law enforcement experience, he is a homicide expert in the Department of Clinical Sociological at the University of New Hampshire and co-director of the university's Justice Work Program, a think tank specializing in law enforcement and justice issues. When something goes sour, like an increase in crime, Kirkpatrick says, everyone looks for a way to explain why, yet that when things go well, like this long-term fall in crime rate, nobody bothers to look at why. Surprising reasons for drop in crime rate. Militarized proactive policing may have had some effect on the drop in crimes in the U.S., but Kirkpatrick says, I don't think it is a big thing. Crime is down, even in many cities where police forces have been cut for budget reasons, and experts agree that the decline in crime began before the militarization of policing really started to take off. Other factors is likely a play bigger role. One is increasing immigration, since, contrary to common belief, communities with greater numbers of immigrant families show the biggest drop in crime thanks to those families' stronger social fabric. Another factor is an aging population. Older people commit fewer violent crimes. So what's behind the push to put more police on our streets with ever more impressive military equipment while training them to behave like occupying troops in Iraq or Afghanistan? One might assume that the militarization of American law enforcement began after the national trauma of 9/11, but in fact its roots go back decades earlier, when media stories in the 1970s created the impression that the nation was awash in illegal drugs. An aroused Congress passed a no-knock law in 1970. The law allowed police to conduct drug searches and arrests by entering homes without first presenting a warrant. President Nixon's declaration of his war on drugs a year later led to an exponential increase in warrantless drug searches, with an inviolable emphasis on military-style policing. SWAT team action soared from hundreds annually in the 1970s to thousands a year in the 80s to 40,000 a year by 2005, according to a report by a libertarian Cato Institute. The author of that report and academic experts study the issue. Now estimate there may have been as many as 70,000, 80,000 such raids in 2013 alone. Hard figures are not available. The Justice Department does not keep records on SWAT team usage. All right. Woo! Excuse me. The 9/11 effect. On the top of the increase triggered by the Nixon's war on drugs, Presidents George W. Bush, war on terror, and aftermath of 9/11 gave a dramatic boost of militarization of American police forces. There has been a clear escalation of violence by police, particularly since 9/11, said Bridget Keller, who heads up the National Police Accountability Project of the National Lawyers Guild. The willingness of police to use very harsh measures against people has definitely increased. A big part of the problems, she says, is that these days officer safety is given primacy over protect and serve. A case in point: a South Carolina sheriff's deputy in February shot and seriously injured a 70-year-old man at a traffic stop when the man tried to retrieve his cane from the back of his pickup truck. The sheriff's department said the deputy acted appropriately, as he had legitimate fear that the cane might have been a long rifle. Another example: New York City police shot and injured an unarmed man who was acting erratically in Times Square. The officers were exonerated, while the man they shot was charged with causing injury to several bystanders who were hit by police officers' stray bullets. That's pretty traditional, to be honest. I am for all police officers not getting hurt on the job, says the Lawyers Guild Keller. But if you make that your first concern, then it's problematic, because you allow to use deadly or excessive force in practically every situation between an officer and a citizen, and you end up with citizens getting hurt. In fact, while being a police officer has been getting less dangerous, killings committed by police have been rising despite the drop in police who are killed. The numbers are eye-opening. The Justice Department, which keeps all kinds of statistics on violent crime, does not tally up individuals killed annually by police, but by combing public news reports and other sources. The Justice Policy Institute has estimated that police officers in the U.S. killed 587 people in 2012 alone. Over the course of a decade, they tallied more than 5,000 in the U.S. during that period, far more than the number of people who have lost their lives, in fact, officially classified as terrorism, in roughly in the same span. The many instances of deadly police violence captured on video gave a visceral reality of these tactics. They show police beating and sometimes needlessly shooting citizens, even those with their hands up or armed only with a knife or stick while standing, too far from responding officers to pose a threat. In some jurisdictions, police have responded to these damaging videos by routinely confiscating bystanders' cell phones and threatening witnesses with arrest, even though federal courts have consistently held that citizens have the right to photograph and videotape officers engage in police actions. The National Police Accountability Project's Keller suggests that along with the public's acceptance of military-style policing, the killing of civilians has become more acceptable too. The police are rarely punished for killing people, even those who are unarmed or already restrained, because in most communities, police shootings are investigated by the police themselves or by a closely allied district attorney's office. Instead, about 95% of police shootings end up being ruled justified. A statistic that hasn't changed as the body count has risen. I think when non-targeted individuals are killed in a raid or when a person is shot in the course of a routine traffic stop, it has seen as a kind of collateral damage, Keller said, instead of as some tragic or criminal use of excessive force by police. Public indifference to civilian casualties in police stations highlights a disconnect. The public perceives rampant crime, while the actual crime reports suggest nothing of sort. This fundamental misapprehension seems to be fueling the continuing political push for more police and tougher policing, while the militarization of law enforcement has a little or no relation to falling crime rate. There is reason to fear that it is eroding our constitutionally protected right under the 1st, 4th, 5th in the U.S. in the Constitution's Bill of Rights. I have to add this to it, say the 9th as well, and the 5th, because when they like to investigate you, when they ask you questions, that's an investigation. I will proceed. I'm not sure that spending money on more police, on Calver suits, and on things like armored vehicles is the most efficient thing to do, says UNH's Kirkpatrick. It might be better to spend it on Big Brother, Big Sister type programs and other kinds of services for kids. The trouble is we generally implement public policy based on sentiment, not logic or statistics, and thanks to the 24-hour news cycle, it is really quite dramatic reports on crimes. The average Joe or Jane thinks that things have gone nuts. All right. Yep, it's just good article. They do. If you want to donate to them, there's a link below. It is tax deductible, and I do have to say too, a lot of reasons why crime is dropping, because a lot of the states and even some local towns been using more pro self-defense laws. That's another reason why crime went down. Because the fact is this: what criminals fear the most, not the system, but armed citizens or citizens that will fight back. That scares the living daylights out of them, because criminals love dishing it out but hate receiving. That's their version of blowback. They really saw in their pants. So that's one of the reasons why crime has been going down. And even if you go to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which is a link on there for this page, it gives you all the details. And furthermore, the whole militarizing police is very dangerous. We should use a 10th Amendment stance on it, because the whole thing is they want every police department, Homeland Security wants every police department in the country to be centralized. And that's why when it comes to sheriffs going on a 10th Amendment stance, they consider that the DHS considers them to be a threat. We have to honor constitutional sheriffs. I'm going to put a couple of links on there too during my show. On my Spreaker page, which I haven't really been addressed, but I will do that, and that includes